There we are. Hello, welcome everyone. This is the second live stream, and this time with my guest Loish, the amazing
Hello.
Loish. I think most of you will probably know her. For those who don't, check out her website, loish.net. She's an amazing artist known for her work for Guerrilla Games, Blizzard, Lego, Coca-Cola, but even more for her personal work. Welcome, and how's it going?
It's going okay, considering the circumstances. I've been able to continue drawing and working, um, despite all of the news, so that's something I'm very happy about. But it's been emotionally quite a heavy time, but I think it's been that way for everybody.
I think so too. Yes, it's pretty crazy for me. Um, well, how did your life change because of that? Has it really affected your daily life?
Um, Not that much actually. Well, I started working from home instead of working in my office space. So I leave the house to work in a space outside of my house, about 10 minutes biking, and I'm now working in my home office and I'm here all day. So that's the main. I'm still using the same setup, the same tools, similar workflow. So I don't think that much has changed. But for me, it is quite a big change because I used to really depend on that switch, leaving the house and
Hmm.
going to a different setting, something that I really needed to get into the right work mindset to work. And now it's just like everything's kind of become a blur. So that's like a big adjustment for me. I still need to
Hmm.
figure out how to maintain some kind of structure.
Yeah, I had I used to live in a house that had only one room, and
Oh
I
God.
would have my tax papers on my bed and my drawings on my kitchen table, and
Yeah.
it would be
Oh my
just
God.
one big blur. So I do work at home now, but I have a separate room.
Yeah, I have a separate room now too, and it's the first time like me and my partner Aryan have lived in like a lot of different places, and usually I didn't have a home office in all those spaces, and we've been living here for almost a year now, and now I finally have my own room, so the timing is like perfect.
Hmm. And has uh, did you notice anything getting less work because of this, or do you still have the same clients?
I have I get like my income from different sources. So I that's one of the things that I think is really important for any like artist and freelancer to do is like to make sure that they're not that that's an option for everybody, right? Because everybody has a different situation, but if it's possible to try and get your income from like many different sources or try to spread out your income sources because all of my event-based income fell away. So I give workshops and I travel for the workshops, and I also, go to events. I do um, speaking at events, and all of those things just disappeared. But I also do concept art. So when all of that happened, when the events kind of fell away, I was able to contact some of my clients to check if they had any projects. Unfortunately, they did. So, and I also have my Patreon. So I'm trying to find those income sources that are working for this
Mm.
for the time being and focus on those and leave the other ones behind for now.
Yeah, you started Patreon not so long ago. How is that working out for you?
It's been amazing. It's been awesome because like I thought it would be so much more work than it really is. So that's what kept me from doing it for a really long time. But now that I've been doing it for 3 months, it's been like just wonderful. Like a wonderful, cozy little community. Everybody's like super friendly. It's really easy to reach out, and it's been like I wish that I had known that it would be so nice
Okay.
because I would have done it earlier, you
Okay.
know. But I'm really happy that I did it, and I feel like it's like what I really underestimated is that it really feels like a special little club, like a cozy little club of people.
Okay.
I thought it would be like just another platform that I had to keep up with,
Hmm.
but it's become more like this nice, cozy little place that I can go to.
And do you have set moments where you post something?
Yeah, I try to post consistently every week, 2 to 3 times a week. And I try to post like a mix of art and also like videos, resources, and all that kind of stuff. So I try to like
Cool.
mix it up. Every month I have sort of like a rough plan of the kind of content I want to make, and then I make sure to like record the process and think about like as I'm drawing, think about like, oh, what can I, what kind of insights can I give based on this art? So it's like I always try to get a nice mix because I know some people are there to support my art and some people are there to get like resources and knowledge and some people just want to see the process. So I try to keep everybody happy.
Okay, so you do videos where you comment while you're drawing?
No, I haven't done that yet.
Okay.
I was thinking of doing something like that, in the future, at a different tier.
Okay.
Like maybe one, because right now I only have one tier and it's like a $5 tier. And it's not, there's no higher ones. And I'm thinking about adding a higher tier at a later point so I can make like tutorials with commentary. And the reason I would make that a separate tier is because it's like so much work for me to record audio.
Hmm.
And I hate the sound of my own voice, so I try to avoid that as much as possible.
Do you also think it's difficult to draw and speak at the same time?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I tend to like rant a lot, like talk a lot, and then I'm like, what did I just say? I want to edit it a lot,
Yeah.
and then the editing process takes even longer than making the video. So I'm getting better at it because now I'm doing sketchbook tours, and that's been like pretty manageable for me to just kind of speak freely, and I'm getting better at that. So I feel like
Okay, cool.
if my skills in that area have improved, then it'd probably be easier for me to make like videos with commentary as well.
Okay, cool. And so at this moment, how do you give the information about the process then?
I write it down. So I
Okay.
make like a process video, and then in the post where the process video is, I add like a lot of text. And in that text, I don't really say like what the process is, but more like what is something you can pay attention to while watching the video. And then it's more like a like a mindset thing. So I say like, all right, so here's my process for this painting, and something you can notice in this painting is that I'm using the lasso tool to shade, and then I explain how the lasso tool works for me, why it's a useful tool, and then people can know that and then watch it and then identify that method.
Okay, cool.
And for each video, I try to highlight a different like aspect of my process that you can notice and see, just so that people watch it. Like I do want people to get their own thing out of it, like everybody's looking for something different, and I want them to watch it, and I don't want to like tell them exactly how to look at it, but just give like hints and
Yes,
advice.
cool. Just thinking of what you mentioned earlier about having different sources of income. I think it's funny because I think most people who want to be an artist or who went through the process of becoming an artist recognize the thing where people say that you shouldn't do that. You should become a lawyer or a doctor because if a freelance life as an artist, it's uncertain. But
Yeah.
in a way, I think if you're a freelancer and you're able to spread the income like that, it's even safer than having just one job because some jobs right now you just can't work from home if you work in a factory. But
Yeah,
if
that's
you
true.
if you have different income sources, there's always something that keeps going.
Yeah, that's true. Although it really depends how you look at it, right? Because it also depends where you're located, I think. Because like in the Netherlands, it's hard to fire someone. Like you can't just randomly fire somebody, right? And if you do get fired, you get like some kind of like income for a while. Uh, so you do get support from that company till you can get back on your feet. And then if you don't, you have the right to bijstand, like so in English, like
Well,
I guess
welfare.
welfare, yeah. But as a ZZP'er in the Netherlands, so as a freelancer, you don't actually have the right to any of that as long as you're still like your business is still registered. And I think now, I think it really depends on how you approach it because as a freelancer, it's really important to have a buffer and that's something that like not everybody's able to do, you know?
Hmm.
So I think it depends on what field you're in and like how, in my case, having a social media following makes all the difference, right? And not everybody has that they can fall back on because that makes a difference for me for my Patreon. So I think it really depends. But I am a huge believer in like never putting, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And even if you have like a steady job, like to also have some things on the side for yourself, like a creative project for yourself or something that like a way to express yourself that isn't fully dependent on just the paid work because you never know what will grow from it, right? And if you put all your eggs in one basket, you could really end up like, losing everything
Yeah.
when unexpected changes occur. So that's something that I recommend as much as possible. But I think in the case of how, what's been happening lately with the pandemic, there's nothing you can do to fully prepare for something
That's
like
right.
this.
That's right.
Like
And also,
people who are now like struggling, you can't blame them, because there's
no,
no, you
no,
can't prepare.
that's right. And even the sectors where people are still working, in the long run, if this lasts longer, everyone will be affected by it. So I don't think
Yeah,
this is the right time for the things that usually work. I think everything
yeah,
is changing at the moment.
exactly. There's like, it's just so unprecedented, and all everybody can do is just like cling to their loved ones and hope for the best. So, but for me, it has been very like just in general in my life, it's been very useful to have like my eggs in different baskets so that I can adapt to changes and also just like move to the stuff when I get bored with one thing, move to something else that I enjoy more, stay
Yeah.
flexible. Yeah.
Okay. And so the Patreon, is that, do you consider that personal work, or does that become work now that you started it? That you
It is personal work technically because I draw what I want to draw, but I do approach it as work in terms of like I schedule it in. I have a list of like deliverables that I want to have,
hmm,
in the time that I have to work on my Patreon stuff. Like I have these things that I want to have every month, and I try to stick to that because I know that if I didn't have that, I would just do nothing. I really need to like kick myself in the ass to get something done. Unfortunately,
hmm,
like I used to be like when I was younger, I would just draw for fun, but now like art has become my job. So if I do what I want to do for fun, I'll just watch Netflix, I'll do
hmm.
nothing. So so I have to like approach it with a similar mindset as client work.
Is that also in general that you have to kick yourself in the butt to get drawing, or is it something that you do naturally?
Sometimes I do it naturally, like sometimes I'm just bored and I just end up drawing a little bit, but actually well, because it's my job, like I haven't had it. I think if I stopped drawing completely for like months, I would find myself doing it again more naturally, but um, I haven't done that, It's my job, so I have to do it every day, and I always have to like kickstart it.
Okay, okay,
Yeah. Because
okay.
I'm older now. Like
Does
the
it have
older
to
I
do with
get, the more
age?
it's like I realize that scheduling it in and planning it in is the only way to actually make it happen because otherwise
Okay.
it just doesn't happen.
Well, it sounds really smart. For me, I think well, I think I think I'm fearful. For the first 10 years of my career, I've been completely scared of losing it all, because I was finally making a living doing art, and I was just scared of losing that. And because of that, I drew always. I thought, if it fails, then I don't want to be the one who is to blame. So I do everything I can to
Mhm.
uh, to be the best artist I can be.
Yeah.
Now I think in that process I forgot that having a personal life and relaxing from time to time is
Right.
just as important to getting to be the best you can.
Oh yeah.
So there are times where I overwork myself, and it's still something that I have to be careful about, because for me, that's why I wanted to speak about this balance, because for me that's maybe the hardest thing of being an artist, to find that balance, because um, for me it kind of shifts from pure joy, like drawing, because it's the most, the greatest thing to do, and it can shift to something I feel like I have to do. I have to do this because otherwise, I will lose my skills and stuff. And
Yeah.
I can't really tell when one shifts to the other and back. It's a gradual thing, and it goes back and forth. That's
Yeah.
why for me it's really hard. So when you say that you schedule these things, I'm like, wow, that's a really smart way to approach it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only way that works for me right now at this stage of my life. But I definitely recognize that thing where, like, if you've, that's why I find the scheduling thing does have a risk, that you sometimes force it when you're not like really in the right mood, And I think if you force drawing when you're not in the right mindset, so like what you were saying, drawing because you feel like you have to and everything depends on it, or you're drawing because like you're forcing yourself to do it just to get something done. If you have that mindset, you can end up like really wiring your brain wrong.
Mm.
Like you can end up really creating a connection in your brain between like unpleasant feelings of failure and fear with the creative process. And then
Mhm.
I think that that's why a lot of people get art blocked, because then they
Mm.
sit down and they draw and then all of those feelings flood in, like I'm going to
Mhm.
fail and I have to do this and last time I did it, it wasn't right, and you get like all these negative thoughts and feelings. So that's why what you said about relaxing and trying like and not drawing and taking breaks from drawing is almost as important to the creative process as drawing, because you have to allow your brain to like get in a positive mindset. You have to keep
Yeah.
the association between the creative process and enjoyment, and
Yes.
aesthetic pleasure.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. And the,
yeah,
and the opposite happens also, where I'm working on a painting, and then I have client work to do, and I just I look over my shoulder and I see my painting at my easel, and
yeah,
I just can't not paint while I have work to do, because I'm just
yeah,
so excited about the painting I have to do. So that's the other the other side of the same coin, I think,
yeah,
where it's just pure joy, and then there is work you have to do, and then
yeah.
it's really strange.
Yeah, I always need both actually. Like
Mm.
if I have only work for too long, then I start to generate all these ideas and things that I want to do for myself. And then I have exactly what you have. Like you're looking at you're thinking about the stuff that you could be doing, and you're like, oh, I wish I had the time to do my own thing. And it becomes like a frustration. But if I have too much time to do my own thing, I get lost. Like I lose the structure
Yeah.
uh, that I have when I have client work. And for me, like I find it really nice when an art director looks at my stuff and is like, "Yeah, just why don't you try pushing this a little further or doing a little bit more with that?" And then I'm like, oh, "Okay, do I have to?" And then I do it, and it's like so much better,
Mm. Yeah.
Like working in a team or working with art, like certain art directors, helps to elevate my work like beyond what I do on my own. Like on my own, I'm fairly lazy. So I think I always need both.
Yeah.
I need to do client work to learn what I'm capable of and to push myself. And then I need to do the personal work for enjoyment and to like feel a positive and warm connection to drawing that
Yeah.
is like from the heart and not just, work.
Yeah. Sounds like a great balance. I have the same thing, where uh, client work really, asks of you to draw stuff also that you normally would never draw, because
Yeah.
it's not your interest, or and then but this is just the job you have to do, and so
Yeah.
so you learn so much about things that normally you would just skip.
Exactly. Exactly. I've done so much stuff that I never thought I could or would do. And I've learned that I'm much more flexible than I thought I was as an artist. And that's something that I want to show more in my personal work. But my personal work is so much about just feeling calm and relaxed and putting on the right music and being in a certain flow. So that art is very comfort zone-y,
Hmm.
which I think is also nice. But I want to push myself a little more in that way in my personal work that I have in my client work. And that's why I started the Patreon as well. Because I was thinking like, all right, that's a good incentive, like a good push for
Yeah,
me.
sounds good. Yes.
Yeah.
And so, how uh, do you have a specific way of coming up with subject matter, or is that an intuitive approach, or how does that work for you?
Um, Usually, like I'd say when I'm making my paintings, like my digital paintings are, I think, the most personal kind of work that I do. It's really something that I try to like show subject matter and color combinations and compositions that are really personal to me and in my own style. That I those I usually do. I just sit down and I do like a bunch of um, little thumbnails and ideas for them in a short amount of time when I'm feeling very creative. And then at a later point, I'll finish them off. And usually finishing them is more of a mindless process than the first steps, right? When you're first creating it. Like when you're first creating a new drawing, you really have to analyze it and think, make a lot of creative decisions. And then after that, you can kind of like sail, like
Mm.
ride the wave
Yes.
as you finish it. So I try to like focus creating new subject matter on those super creative days and like making like as many quick
Mm.
painting setups as I can, and then I'll finish them on less creative days. But the subject matter is really intuitive for me, so it
Okay.
really depends on like how I feel on that day, or something that I saw that inspired me, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do something with that today. So it's very like based on feeling.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't really analyze it too much because I think it's important for me personally not to overanalyze what I draw
Mm.
too much because otherwise it kind of blocks me up. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I sometimes when I'm doing a painting, I really, maybe it's just silly, but I just love, applying paint to a canvas. Just the act of mixing paint and just putting it on the canvas. And then
yeah,
when the painting is finished, I want to do that again, but then you have to, start over. You have to go through that entire process of coming up with an idea, of finding references, or,
yeah,
everything. But I just, sometimes I think I can skip that and just start painting right away. But you need to, well, at least I need to have that process at the beginning of, you have to. Actually, I think a painting is, what we see is the result, but it's really about the process.
yeah,
And if you skip a step in the process, or your head isn't in the right place, then that painting won't even be there, because you
yeah,
have to go through all those steps, and maybe frustration or enjoyment, or whatever, inspiration, and when you have that result, and especially when it's a painting that came out great, you're like, wow, I want to do that again. But for me, it's easy to forget that all the steps that were needed to get to that final result was, sometimes it was just a struggle, or so.
yeah. That's true. That's true. And sometimes it's funny to see also how many paintings that I struggle with, and then I look at them later and I'm like, oh, that worked out pretty well. And
Yeah.
then some stuff that I struggle with, and then it didn't. You can just see it in the work.
Mm.
There's a lot of emotion, I think, that goes into the process of creating a painting because, like, you
Absolutely.
go through all these stages. And in my case, I listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm painting as well because, like, especially when I get to the part where it's just rendering, I just get a
Mm.
little bored. So I need, and then when I look at those paintings, I just remember what I was listening
Oh
to, the
yeah.
stories that I was listening to and what I was feeling at that moment. And
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so funny. When I was in high school, I had this teacher, and he would tear out every page in my notebook that had a drawing on it, because I wasn't allowed to draw in class.
oh
And that's
gosh,
just like, fighting against a force of nature, because for me it was impossible not to draw. So,
yeah,
I ended up with a notebook that had no pages in it, and that teacher was really like, when the test was coming up, he was like, haha, and but I don't know the grade I got, but it was a good one, because I remembered everything he said because of the drawings I did, actually. For me, that was really a
oh
way a
yeah,
way to remember stuff. So he thought I wasn't paying attention, but
yeah.
in fact I was paying attention. I was actually connecting it to every drawing that I did. So
Yeah, I had the same thing. I found out in high school that like everything that I had to learn for my exams was they called it a syllabus, which is just like a list of everything you need to know. And it was International Baccalaureate. So it's like an international program. And every year, the syllabus is the same for every single student who does it. And the teachers are just teaching what's in the syllabus, you know? And I found out, like, oh my God, yeah, I don't actually have to listen to these teachers. I can just go home, read the syllabus myself, you know?
Yeah.
And that actually worked a lot better for me than like listening in class. Because I thought that like I just get bored listening to people. So I would draw all day. I would come into class and just lay out all my papers and just start drawing. And my teachers were also like, Lois, are you paying attention? And I would be like, definitely, like, don't worry. And I would go home and like study from the syllabus, and I got really high grades. That's why the
cool.
teachers accepted that
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
for
okay.
me, because I did get high grades, and
Yeah.
and I was passionate about, but I just didn't feel like class, it just didn't work for me. I don't know. I think everybody's different, but now you have a lot of kids like learning from home, right? I would have done great in that
Yeah.
situation.
Well, I
Like,
think
just
that.
give me the book. I'll teach myself, you
Yeah, well,
know?
I think the thing you say everybody's different. I think that's really it. Everyone learns in a different way. And the school system is really one way of teaching children.
Right.
All in the classroom and the teacher explaining stuff. But and there are people who learn in different ways, but also they have different interests. So, and I'm not saying that I know a school system that would work better, but I do feel that some children will benefit from this situation studying at home, while others,
Yeah.
they'd better be in school.
Exactly. And I think some people are just really great at, I think some people are great at listening and getting the most out of a class. And this is something I learned from giving workshops as well, that like I'm amazed by my workshop students, how much they're picking up and how much they're like asking, wanting to learn more. But for me, I've always been self-taught in everything. Also, like in school, I was just like, I'll do it my own way. And with art as well, I taught myself everything. I did go to animation school and I learned a lot there in animation school about like the animation software but everything about digital art and construction and like drawing a character, getting the shapes, the movement, I taught myself. And I think that that's like both ways are fine. But for me, the self-taught method has always been better. And I think that's also why I'm a freelancer, why I really like being a freelancer, is so that I could just figure stuff out on my own as I go. And I can structure my day the way that I want. And I can find out for myself, like how, what hours work best for me and when I'm most productive. And other people really work, like they thrive in a team and in a more structured environment. And for them, having like a job in, like as an artist, it works a lot better than
Yeah,
being freelance.
yeah, yeah. For me, it works much better to be a freelancer. I'm like a hermit. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think people will probably ask themselves when you say that, or at least I'm interested. How do you make sure that if you teach yourself that you don't miss out on things that you might not be aware of things that you don't know, and sometimes a teacher can be good to give feedback on that.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of multifaceted for me because, like, on one hand, I actually think that it's for my creative process helpful to sometimes not be aware of everything that I don't know, especially when it comes to technique. So, like, I use self-taught techniques. So sometimes I'm not using the newest approach. Um, and then somebody's like, "Oh, do you know that you can do the same thing with this tool?" And sometimes I'm like, "I just don't. I know that I could probably do this better and have a more efficient workflow, but sometimes I'm not. I don't want to take in new knowledge because it gets me stuck."
Mm.
Um, so I try to like. I think that we live in an age of like information and inspiration overload, and that sometimes it's okay to turn it off and to like
Mm.
just do what you know best and thrive in your own comfort zone. So that's something that I try to do, but then sometimes I do want to learn some new stuff and I want to be refreshed. And in that case, it really helps me to just be a part of the artist community, and especially like what we don't have now anymore, unfortunately, but like live events. like
Yeah.
playgrounds and Lightbox and these events where people are giving talks and talking about their progress and how they've gotten to where they are and how they do things, and people are sharing knowledge. That always helps me open my eyes
Mm.
and generate some new ideas on how I could do things, and gets me thinking about how I could change up my own way of working and drawing. But I try to like ignore any feeling of missing out things.
Okay.
I
So
just try to think like it'll come to me when I need it, when I'm
okay,
open to
that's
it.
interesting because you uh, I think I spent a lot of years just studying and basically glossing over the fact that I could create my own personal work. You know, I would just focus on trying to get my skills as good as possible. But my brother actually once asked me, "So you're studying this and that, but what are you studying for?" And because if you know where you want to go, if you know what you want to express with your art, you know what you need. You know, if you draw comics that are really simply drawn, you don't need to know anatomy. You know, you can just do the comics and focus on, you know, coming up with funny gags. That's probably more important than anatomy. So,
Right.
and I think in a way, well, I'm interested in a lot of stuff, but I think I also felt that I needed to know everything. And so,
Yeah.
how do you balance those two where you want to learn, but at the same time, you don't want to become this. How do you say this? This unit where you're doing the same thing over and over because that's your world and you're not challenging yourself anymore.
I think that that's a really common problem with artists is that they prepare and prepare and prepare without like really jumping out into the world. So they're like studying things all the time, practicing, um, but not confident enough to take the leap to do it their own way because they don't feel ready. Um, that's something I see a lot in my workshop as well. So people are like afraid to just draw something because in my workshop I'm like, just draw something and color it in, just do it. And they're all like, I'm not ready. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Just
Yeah,
try
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah.
Um, I think that that's like a really common thing in the art community because we all believe that we're not yet at the level that we should be. And I remember the main thing that keeps me from getting stuck in that loop is just thinking about. So when I went to animation school, I was like, so life seemed pretty manageable in high school, right? Because I learned that I could just study the syllabus on my own and then get good grades. And I got through, I figured out my way of graduating and getting through. But then I went to art school and suddenly everything was like really too much for me to process. There were all these rules. There was a culture shock as well. It was a Belgian school, but they had all these rules like not too much digital. You have to, tell a story that's like this. You have to use this tool. This assignment is like this, and this. And there were all these bizarre rules, and the way that they talked about animation, I was kind of unlucky because I started studying animation like just, in 2004 and 2005, and this is when they were still using like 4:3 ratios,
Hmm.
and they were still teaching you not to render, to render with lower field first and how to record on a DV tape. And we were animating on paper. And it was like we had like one computer in the whole school that we could use, and it was really slow. Um, and I remember thinking like I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like this is too much for me. I can't. I don't know how to do this right. I don't know how to use this equipment. It looks like it's from, like we had this photographing thing for animation. Like we animated on paper and then we had to photograph it under this like thing that looked like lab equipment from the 80s. It was all so old. And I remember thinking like, this is just way too much for me. This is not manageable, too much. And it was just a rough time either way. Like I just wasn't ready, to study animation at that school. And there were a lot of other factors that just didn't fall into place for me. So I ended up leaving that school and then going to the Utrecht School of the Arts, which was a lot more easy to navigate. But there they also taught us how to record on a DV tape. And they were like, when you work for like an animation studio, you're gonna have to know how DV tapes work. And I remember thinking like I graduated and it just wasn't a thing anymore,
Mm.
So a lot of the stuff that I thought I needed to be prepared for turned out to be outdated information. And then I ended up working as a freelancer, and a lot, like so much of the stuff that I had mentally prepared myself for, that my teacher said I would be dealing with, didn't happen.
Mm.
And they were like, "Oh,
Could you give an
you're."
example?
Well, they said my art was too much the same stuff. I'm always drawing girls, so they were like, "You need to diversify. You need to be able to do this. You need to be able to do that. You need to be able to animate like this and elevate your concept to that." Which is all, it sounds like good sound advice, but by the time that I went into the field, it didn't happen that way. Like, I ended up getting work in character design, drawing exactly what I already knew how to draw for fun. And most of the stuff that I thought I would have to do just didn't happen.
Mm.
My career grew in a totally different direction. Anyway, this is a really long story, but the moral of this story is don't spend too much time preparing and practicing, because it changes too much as you go.
Yeah.
And like you'll end up preparing for stuff that you might find isn't relevant to your
Mm.
life. And if you just dive in, like I dived into character design without much expertise about character design. Like I didn't really know a lot about character design, but I was asked to do it. And then from the feedback that my clients gave me, I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting from their feedback that they want to see more detail. They want to see more like accessories that describe the character. So then I learned how to do that. I learned how to add like storytelling elements to my characters. I learned how to work with shapes. I learned how to work with color or certain details. But if I had prepared for that,
Mm.
I wouldn't have had the jobs that I did, and I wouldn't have grown in the way that I did from them. So you just kind of have to take a leap of faith sometimes as an artist. Like, just jump into something and find out as you go what you're capable of. Because if you prepare and too much for it, and you think like, oh, I can't do this job yet because I'm not ready, you'll waste your time.
Yeah, so did you have a specific goal? Like, did you know you wanted to do character design when they told you you can draw girls, or was it just, coming out of school and just hoping to get a job and going with the flow?
It was really going with the flow. Like I had no idea what I was going to do. I thought I would do maybe like short animations, but that never really happened. I did a few, and then that went away. And then I thought I might do like game art, but I ended up doing more character design, which is totally different from the game art stuff. And I think if I had I had no way of telling what it was going to be. And the thing is as well, when I graduated, there weren't that many stories with female characters in them.
Okay.
They were the female character stuff was like for children or like princesses and stuff, or it was like really sexy characters. And then throughout those years, like from 2009 to like 2015, more and more stories were developed with interesting female leads that were supposed to be appealing not just to children or like men who think the characters are sexy, but women as well. And that's something that changed as I went along, which is another reason why I think it's important to go with the flow, because like things can
Yeah,
change without you can never
absolutely.
know what changes will take place.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to focus. And I could tell a similar story from my time in art school where I wasn't allowed to draw caricatures or children's books
Oh
illustrations.
gosh.
And those were
Yeah.
when I came out of school, those were the first things that, I did to make money. And so there's a different reality in art school than there is in the real world. But even more important, I think, is to focus not on the job that you want, but on what you love to do. If you love to draw characters, then at this point it may be games that ask you to do characters, but who knows? Maybe because of this, the whole game industry collapses and no games will be
Oh
created
God.
anymore. I don't know, but I'm just saying. But
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you don't know how
another
it's going to develop.
exactly, and another market will open up where they do need characters, or maybe it's not even characters, but it's just, the creative process of
Yeah.
developing them that you love. And maybe, there's another industry where you can do that and be just as happy. But I think it's really important to know uh, what makes you tick, what's important to you, and that way you can be flexible in finding the right jobs that how do you say that cater to exactly that need, other
Yeah.
than trying to fit the mold of the character designer or whatever you want to be. Even
Yeah.
I found that we think of character design as, there a movie is being made and we need a character designer, but I have learned that they hire several artists not because they are a character designer, but because they have different sensibilities, different ideas. If they would hire you, they would get your world, your imagination with that. And
Yeah.
that's something that another character designer could never do. That they would come up with something else. So you can have your own specialty within the process of character
Right.
design. So if you develop who you are and what you love to do, then that's more valuable because there's only one of you.
Exactly, exactly. And also, like, I think that if you're trying to prepare for like a certain role, like a mold, like you said, then you're basing it a lot on preconceived notions, right? On what it means to
Yeah,
be that. And if I had to, start with a blank slate and prepare to be a character designer for games, I would think like, oh, well, that means I need to play games. That means I need to like certain types of genres, and means I have to fit that mold, and so my portfolio needs to reflect that. But my portfolio doesn't reflect that at all, and I still work for
yeah,
games because I happen to find clients that want a fresh perspective.
yeah,
So they don't want to have artists. So they happen to be looking for artists that don't have like a gamey
yeah,
portfolio.
yeah.
They want something else, right? And how could I have known that that exists? Like
Exactly.
just by trial and error.
Yes. Cool. We have some questions. Let's have a look.
All right.
Um, Koala Toppy says, how do you schedule your own social media usage to make it work for you and not turn into an obstacle for your work process? Do you have any tips, something that worked for you? For example, do you limit it to the parts of the day, amount of time you go, or days of the week? Do you ever shut off social media for a tad? You want to
Okay. I have a
answer?
lot that I can say about that because I used to kind of wing it with social media, and I found that that wasn't working, especially because the algorithms have changed a lot. Um, and also, it was just too stressful for me. Like, I needed to be in the right mood to post, and you know, that was just so draining. So I decided about half a year ago to start writing my social media posts a week in advance. So on Friday afternoons, I sit down and I prepare the images for social media. So I have them at the set Instagram size, and then I also have a smaller size for the other social media stuff. And then I write the content of the post, and I look up the right hashtags. And recently, thanks to a tip from a friend of mine, I found this platform called Planoli, and you can upload your Instagram stuff into a grid and schedule it. And then when it's time to post, it gives you like a little notification. And then you can just manually, it'll put the images in your camera roll and the text on your clipboard. And then you can really easily post. So now I have them scheduled in advance. And especially now, like in times like this where the pandemic has like a really negative effect on my mental health. Like I'm very drained and very pretty depressed every evening. And then I wouldn't, if I hadn't have planned out my social media posts, I wouldn't have found the energy to post. But now I can just post it without thinking about it. And it's so much easier. So I definitely recommend like to plan it out because then it becomes more manageable the time you spend on it. Another tip that I have is when you post, try to be online a little bit in the like first half hour or hour after posting to just respond to some comments so that the post is active and people can see like that you care about their response and their feedback. I post 3 times a week in general. So, and I post at the time of the day that most people are online. So for me, that's in the evening here. So at the end of the day. So I post on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, sometimes a little more if I have some more art. Um, and I do shut off social media after a while because it's like, I try to stick to that. Like I post and then I'm online for about half an hour or so. And then it's like, you got to let it go because otherwise it just consumes everything. It just takes up all your time.
So again, I hear you schedule a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I really should take note of that. That
Well,
sounds
I've
so
only
smart.
recently started doing this because I read a book, like a productivity book. It's a Dutch book called Grip, and it just has this whole method of like how you can like plan your schedule and to-do lists and all that stuff. And I started doing that because I realized that everything was just kind of a mess in my life. Like I found it hard to keep up because it used to be more manageable, but now I have so much. I have like my client work, I have social media, I have like plans to make like personal projects, I have the Patreon, I have like doing the administration of my business, writing invoices, and it became so much that I was like, okay, I need to change my method. So now I have like a super structured method, but it's fairly new for me. So it's
Mm.
not like I've always been doing it. I
Yeah,
think you
yeah.
could easily build a career without that much structure, but it just helps me now.
Yeah, well, I think it could help me too. Well, when it comes to posting on Instagram, I work really intuitively when it comes to personal art. So, it's not like I'm waiting for inspiration. I just get to work, but I don't post everything. I don't
Yeah.
think everything is interesting enough or good enough or the things where I feel like this is what I want to share. That those are the things that I post. But having that schedule for 3 times a week, especially when I'm working on a full-time job, I wouldn't see how I could create enough content to post that often. How do you deal with that?
Um, I think it's really important to like give when you're on social media to give like a three-dimensional image of who you are. So like it's not about what you make as an artist, just posting your latest art, but it's also a lot about like who are you? What's your tone of voice? What inspires you? What moves you? Like so that people look at your post and they're like, oh, that's a post from Wouter. Wouter is a nice guy. He's very communicative, and that they can get that from your posts. So I think it's important not only to post your work, but also post like throwbacks, post your process, post your inspirations, post like, things that matter to you. Like for me, I'm really into like the seasons, right? So I'm always looking at, the weather and the leaves and nature and trees. Me and Aryan, we go into our backyard every day now and we check like all of the little signs of spring, right? So on the first day of spring, I posted like a spring art
Mm.
tribute post, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So that
Yes.
people, and that's like a way of taking existing art and like posting it in a way that not only shows your art, but also like generates more content so you don't have to always be creating new art. You can also share some of your older stuff, but it also says something about you, like what
Yeah.
you care about and what moves you.
Okay. Makes
um
sense.
yeah, and for me, like I try to do, if I don't have new art, I'll post like every once a week. I'll post a throwback. I'll post something behind the scenes, so like a little bit of my process or something like that, and try to promote something like my Patreon or my prints. That's if I have no new art. So those are the three. If I have like,
Hmm.
I have to sort of dig into some old stuff or like post some pre-existing art, I'll stick to that method. So a throwback, a promo, and behind the scenes.
Okay. That's good advice. I'm I'm gonna make a note of
Yeah.
that.
I started teaching a social media workshop, and I learned like all of this from doing research for my own workshop. So,
Okay. Well, that's you learn a lot when you start teaching, I think.
yeah, yeah, I realized like I had to go beyond my own method and sort of like look into like interesting techniques that other people use, and that taught me so much. Also about scheduling and about like making sure that you have a three-dimensional strategy for to show who you are.
Yes,
Yeah.
makes sense. Yes, I sometimes feel a little guilty when it comes to teaching at schoolism because I give feedback to the student, but I teach several students, And every time I go over their work, I learn so much. So I feel like I'm learning much more than the students themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. Like that's why I really don't like getting up in front of people and teaching. I don't like telling people what to do, and I have like stage fright even in front of a small group, but it's like worth it because of
Mm,
what you learn from it, what you
yeah.
learn about people and the
Yeah,
process,
and for me,
creativity.
teaching is not about telling people what to do. I always try to explain, the principles, the way I think. This is how you can, for example, this is how you can create a point of interest. So,
Yeah.
if you put this in your image, people will look there first. But if you don't want people to look there, you don't do that. So,
Yeah.
for me, it's just about giving the knowledge so that people can decide how they want to use it. Because,
Yeah.
and also, I think every teacher only has their own knowledge, and no one has, the complete picture, knows everything. So
Yeah.
it's just a way of helping each other to improve.
Yeah, and gain insights and ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. We have another question. Do we have another? Can you please give us tips for studying and improving our anatomy skills?
Um, Anatomy skills, I think the main thing for me that has helped for anatomy skills is to do speed sketches and gesture sketches. So to work really fast. I feel like your brain is challenged to learn more if you work faster. So if you do like really quick sketches, gesture sketches, and like small sketches as well, then you're forced to think about the movement and the proportions and not get stuck on the detail. Because I personally feel like if you really want to make something detailed, you can always do that. You can always get all the reference and just like draw every single detail you see. Like that's not as challenging as capturing the life and the movement and then sort of building detail on top of that. So it's those first steps really that teach you the most. So you could go to like live gesture drawing sketches, or you could just get photo reference, or sometimes I even just draw from television. Like I just have TV on and then I look and quickly try to sketch a certain movement. But you learn more when you draw fast. So that's my main tip.
I have a different take on that, maybe. Um, I play music, and well, there's basically two approaches. I actually recently learned about that. When you play music, and it's really complicated. They tell you, play it really slowly, so that if you know how to do it very slowly, then you can gradually increase the speed, and when you turn the speed up, then you play it correctly at the actual speed.
Oh
But
yeah.
then I also, a few years ago, I did tap dancing, and it was really,
Tap dancing. I
it,
love that.
yes. Well,
I did that as a kid.
I really, I
Yeah.
loved that as a kid. Watching Gene Kelly, I was always like, wow, because it looks so effortless, and it just, it was like also watching the Mary Poppins, or those movies where the musicals where they start to sing and dance. It's like, wow, this I as a child I was really enchanted by those worlds. And so a few years ago, my wife and my son and I decided to take tap dance lessons. But the teacher there, she told us, just dance as fast as you can. It doesn't matter if it's wrong. Just now everyone wants to see it, I think. But
Yeah. I'd
but
love to see that.
and then you feel like I'm missing out on every step. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. I'm just doing as fast as I can, but there's no rhythm in it. But she said, well, but you don't, you're not supposed to learn only the right rhythm, but also your muscles have to learn how to move that fast. So you
Yeah.
also have to learn the speed. And I think with drawing, it's the same of both. If you study, the anatomy, really all the muscles and stuff, and how it works, that gives you a lot of insight. but
Yeah.
it doesn't teach you how to draw a gesture or bring life to it or to connect everything. Because if you
Right.
only draw every single muscle, it may be correct, but it's just it's technique only.
Yeah.
And the speedy gesture drawings, they teach you how to observe and to act really fast. In a split second, you have to take a mental photograph and replicate that on the paper. What are those few lines that give you the essence of what this pose is?
Yeah.
So I think both are really important
Yeah.
to get the right balance
I
there.
think so too. And I think also if you're doing like careful studies and sketches that are like really about the detail, to like maybe in the same session, try to draw them again from memory and quickly, for
Yeah.
example. Like little switching between the two helps your brain to like take on a different challenge and not become lazy and overly dependent on the reference. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Because the
Yes.
challenge of moving away from the reference and drawing it from memory, that's really the part where your brain is like, oh, okay, and it goes
Yes.
into like a higher gear.
Absolutely.
I saw like the four-part question
Yes.
from
Uh,
Duda Oliva.
yes. Me and my best friend talk a lot about our fear of sharing our work and giving this leap of faith you talk about. We always think we're not prepared yet. I think what makes it harder is that we are constantly looking at marvelous work by our favorite artist and where we wanted our art to be. How can you set a goal for your development, like learning from our inspirations, without making it paralyze you and demotivating? Is there any advice on how we can be amazed and motivated on a healthy way?
Yeah, I think this is a funny one because remember you were telling me, I don't remember where it was, but you telling me that you went to a museum, I think in Rome or something, or Paris, and you became like totally overwhelmed. Do you remember that we had that
Yes,
conversation?
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, you were like, whoa, like overthinking, and you felt like almost paralyzed by all that inspiration, and you couldn't do anything with it, right?
It was actually, I looked it up. It's called Stendhal syndrome. It was
Oh,
a guy called Stendhal. Uh, he had that for the first time where you see great art, but you're so overwhelmed, you kind of your mind kind of click.
yeah, like,
You go crazy. Yes.
yeah. Yeah, so what I call that is inspiration overload. And I think when you spend too much time like looking at art that you think is super beautiful and super awesome, then you get overloaded and then it becomes like not useful anymore. So it becomes like actually an obstacle in the way of creativity rather than allowing you to do something with it. And I think it happens a lot where, especially if you're looking at an artist you admire, then you're not only looking at art that you like, but you're looking at the art by an artist that you admire. So you probably have a lot of ideas about their ability and their skill and their style that's like sort of right, elevating them, putting them on a pedestal. And and when you do that, you'll always be worse than them,
Hmm.
because your brain has already decided that you admire them so much. And I think that that's what I was talking about with the art block, that you get a negative feedback loop because you start drawing and then you think like it's not good enough. It's not as good as this thing that I love.
Hmm.
And my advice for that is to like actually just shut yourself off, from that other artist and that other art, and just uh, work in your own way. So try to
Hmm.
like just not look at it as much, take a break from it, draw in your own way, and just kind of see where your own drawing takes you and stop comparing, because
Yeah.
comparing is just, it's going to kill your creativity.
Yes.
And the thing about comparing as well is that it's like, maybe it's useful, like say I really want to make like a super colorful bright painting in a specific style, like inspired by James Jean. Then it's useful to look at James Jean's art, because then I can say like, oh, this is how he does that. But say I'm just making a painting and I decide to look at an artist who's a million times better than me, whose level I'm nowhere near. It's just gonna knock me out of the water. It's just gonna make me think like, well, because they are the best at what they do. And you need to find out what you're good at, find your own area of expertise. And like, as my art is like, I specialize in colorful feminine art, but there's tons of like really cool, like dark gothic concept art, alien stuff, like post-apocalyptic, toxic landscapes that also I think are awesome. But it would be really unrealistic for me to think that like if I'm doodling mindlessly that I would be able to create something like that because that's their area of expertise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wish you would have told me this years ago when I wasn't able to visit a museum in a normal way because I would compare myself and thinking of it, it sounds really ridiculous because I would compare myself with Degas and Monet and Sargent and really see myself as the same, not in an arrogant way, but just looking at their work and expecting of myself to create something similar. I really felt like, this is me. I should be doing this, and then I would go home and I would fail miserably,
Yeah.
and I would feel horrible.
Yeah.
And it's literally what you say that you have to shut yourself off. There are moments where you can be open to this inspiration and be inspired by it and just love what you see. But there are also moments where you just need to let them be who they are and not care about that anymore
Yeah.
because you have
Yeah.
to take that step and start your own journey. And the thing is, if you compare yourself to any amazing artist, you are looking at the result of years of work that came from someone's personal experience, and you can only take the next step that you can take. You can't suddenly, even if it was possible to become that other person, then still you would need to do a lot of work to get to that level. But it's not even possible to do that. You can only become the best version of yourself. So
Yeah.
because of that, you just have to let that go and say, well,
Yeah.
it's great they can do that in a perfect way, and also, you're focusing on these other artists, which is really subjective because you're not focusing on dancers or on
Yeah.
musicians who are way better than you, but now suddenly
Yeah.
you chose to focus on their art and, and
Yeah.
and not on the other artist, but on their art, and now you feel miserable. It doesn't make any sense if you think of it.
No. And
And
it's
so,
not productive. So like anything that isn't productive, just try to ditch it. And I think it's the same as like sort of self-love in a way, like if you try to appreciate yourself for who you are, because I think the same goes for artists. Like every artist has their own sort of vision and view and thing that they love and that they notice and also their own unique skill set. And it's like part of really using that to the maximum potential is saying like, okay, so this is who I am. And you could try to improve your skills in certain areas, but you have inherent strengths that are yours and aren't going to change. So
yeah,
it's the same as accepting yourself for who you are. It's like saying, all right, well, I'm not like the smartest person, but I'm really nice. I don't know, whatever. Like choosing
yeah,
what you're not and what you are and building
exactly.
on what you really are. And I think artistically everybody has like a unique vision that they can do well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking at the time, we've talked for about an hour.
Hmm.
I know you still have to eat, so I don't know.
Yeah.
um,
I have a terrible schedule. I also have a meeting to watch the last episode of Tiger King on Netflix tonight.
okay, what's that?
You don't know about Tiger King? Okay, so it's like a documentary series about a guy who has like a like a big cat zoo where
Okay,
you can like you know what? I can't even explain it. It's
okay,
the craziest thing I've ever seen.
okay,
Like watch it and just you will be overwhelmed. Like there's
okay,
so
cool.
much insanity happening in just a short time span. Like you will lose your mind. Anyway, I have to watch
Okay.
the final episode.
Cool.
But maybe I should answer one more question before I
Yes,
go.
yes,
Um, can I choose one?
yes, of course.
Um, do, 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 do. I actually can't choose one. Let's see. They did request like for you to do a tap dancing demo. Maybe you could do that. um,
Who knows?
all right.
Maybe someday.
Yeah. So one of the it was like an early question. Um, oh, so for people who said I always wanted to start a Patreon, but I'm not sure what I would post on it. Give like some quick Patreon advice. Personally, I would recommend to anyone starting a Patreon to post stuff that's like incidental to your workflow, because that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to use the Patreon to create as much of the content as I like would be creating if I had all that time for myself. Like creating new art, creating sketches and all that stuff. But then I try to post stuff that like I can record the process of doing it or give like insights into doing it so that it doesn't take too much time. Um, and I definitely recommend, like, I got a lot of questions about, anatomy and tips like brushes, software, and that sort of stuff. Like, consider if you can to become a patron. It's just $5 a month, and I share all that information and I answer all the questions that I get, and I give like tips and advice, and I show how I work. So if you like what I do, please consider going to patreon.com/Loish.
Cool. Well, I think that's a great ending to this talk. Thank you for being on this stream. And
Yeah, it was really actually it's like almost the most social interaction that I've had in like since March 10th. So
yes, I think for most of us.
yeah.
Good. Well, great. Thank you all for checking in. And next week next Wednesday, I will do another live stream, and then my guest will be Thomas Fluhardy. See you all
Ooh,
then.
amazing. All right.